Okay, so once we've made our models, next thing we want to do is be ready to do the casting with the investment plaster. So before we do that, we want to know what the weight is going to be. So I put both of them on this digital scale, and they weigh nothing. Let's try it again. Okay, we're going to zero it out. Okay, so we're going to consider that they weigh 1 gram. Okay, that's important so that we know how much silver we're going to use. And we'll go into the formula later as to how we determine how much silver we're going to use. After we weigh them, the next thing we want to do is put them into part of our casting flask. So I'm going to take a tool and be able to make a hole in here and place my one model here. And I'm going to heat up a tool using the alcohol lamp to soften the wax that's in there so that our model doesn't move when we do the casting. Okay. Because when we put the plaster in, if it moves, it's not going to work. Okay, we tested that one. That one works pretty good. Put my second one in there. And I repeat the process. And you can tell we just heats up enough to start getting the wax to flow. Okay, so you can see how they're both in there nice. Hopefully it doesn't move on us, which it won't. Okay, and after we do the burnout, what we'll find is that inside our plaster, this part will act as the sprue for where the molten sterling silver will go into to fill the cavity that is left from our models. Okay. Our next step that we're going to do is use a product called Debubblizer. The Debubblizer helps to reduce the amount of bubbles that may form around our models as the investment plaster gets poured. So it's the type of thing that, you know, what you see is what you get. Okay, so if we have a lot of bubbles in there, and we're going to be able to reduce the bubbles by vibrating them out, but it's also a matter of not letting them attach themselves to the models. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Okay, so we're going to take our flask and put it on over our base, and it's a rubberized base to allow us to get it in there. Okay, and two things you want to make sure of. One is that it's far enough that's at least 1/4 of an inch below the lip of the metal flask, and that they're not touching each other, and that they are not touching the walls. When we go to fire this in the kiln, we will be removing the bottom. Okay, so here's one that was done previously. So we just take the base off. Okay, and in this space here, after it's been fired, and we put it into the centrifugal, into the centrifuge, the silver will actually go into here and into the two sprues. Okay. Next thing we want to do is start to measure out our investment plaster. So, first step before we do that is that we fill with water up to this black line, which is approximately half a cup of water. And we put it on a level space, and we can see that I have too much water in there. So I'm going to remove some. And let's see if we got it right. Okay, so you can see where it's level with our black line here. Okay. The idea here is that there's a ratio of plaster to water. So that we don't start activating the plaster before we actually get it into the mix. We try and wipe this out, get it as dry as possible. Okay, so our next step is to fill the investment plaster up to here, which is just over around 1.25 cups, 1.25 cups. So I just don't dump it in there because I don't want this, it's not that it's going to hurt you, but we don't want any of the dust to become airborne, because it's not something that necessarily smells nice. Okay, so I scoop it in there. Okay, a couple more. And again, we can see that it is at our red line. So I'm going to cover up my plaster here. I'm just going to grab a spoon. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is slowly add the investment plaster into my crucible here. Now I'm going to set my timer up here for 10 minutes because that's our working time. And I'm going to mix our investment plaster with the water. And I want to get the consistency of like pancake batter or sour cream. You don't want it being like Greek yogurt where it's too thick. because then it'll add some, it won't flow correctly. Okay, so you can see how it's coming off the spoon here, and that's kind of like the consistency that we want to have. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is that we're going to put it onto our vibrator. And the vibrator is going to help bring any of our air bubbles up so we can reduce as much as possible. I'm going to take this small hammer, mallet, and I'm going to tap on the side to encourage the air bubbles to come up to speed up the process. Once we pour this into our flask, we're then going to repeat the process of vibrating the flask to again get the air bubbles out. Now there may be some blue that we will see that will come to the surface, but that's going to be any debubblizer that hasn't dried yet onto our models. Okay, so we're looking pretty good here. So now I'm going to tip my flask and my crucible to pour in. And we don't want to just dump it right on top because we don't want to move our models. We'll just help it out a little bit. Okay. Now I put this up here. And it's going to overflow a little bit, but that's not a problem. It'll clean up nice for us. You can see the bubbles up here coming up and then popping. So that's a good thing. If we see something that looks like a bubble and it doesn't pop, chances are that is your model, and we want to stop and start over again because it just means that you're not going to get your product to cast because it's not held in the right spot. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to set this off to the side. Turn my machine off. Turn my timer off now. And we're going to let this dry. Okay? And then once it's dried, or while it's still a little bit soft, I will scratch initials into it. And then, and also the period so that we know whose it is. And from there, once it is dried and we are ready, we'll be able to put it into our furnace and do a burnout and then do our casting. So the burnout gets done overnight, and in the morning when we come in, we put on a hold, so it's holding at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. And while it's holding, when we set up the crucible we set up our centrifuge to melt our silver and do our casting. Now once we've done here, obviously cleanup is a big thing. We do not want to put this into the sink because it will harden and destroy your plumbing. So we're going to come over here to our wash bucket and quickly clean up our tools. I'm going to clean out okay, so okay, and that's the end of part one. Part two will be the actual casting. The first thing we're going to do is light our torch, start with the gas, add a little oxygen, get a nice blue flame. Alright, so we're going to spin this up.
This gets spun 3 times.
Right.
1,
One part over there.
2. Ready?
Yep.
3.
Okay, so we're going to use our torch. We're going to use our torch to melt our silver. Now this was silver that was left over from screws and stuff. We want to make a really nice puddle here. We don't want anything going to waste. This particular casting is taking about 50 grams. So you can see how it melted down pretty quickly. I'm going to add a little borax to it. The borax acts as a flux to help clean any impurities. Just like flux would in any type of welding that we would do. I don't know if you can see on the video the nice puddle that we're getting here. But at the count of 3, we're going to let it go. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So now hopefully we got everything in there, and we can see in the sprue, okay, kind of looking like glass, and that's because of the flux. The flux kind of gives it a glass look. Okay. So now we're going to submerge it into our water. And it's still a little too hot to handle, as you can possibly hear the bubbling of the water. Okay, so now I'm going to reach in and find our casting. A little warm. Washing to get the investment plaster out. And as you can see, we have a casting of a nice ring that was done on a 3D printer. And from here, some filing and sanding will take place. And then we'll be putting it into the pickling solution to get rid of the rest of the burnt stuff. Okay, and then we'll go through the various polishing stages, and then we'll have a nice shiny silver ring.